Well, go on, everybody. Lennox here from Simple123 Trader. This is the playbook weekly outlook for March 7th to the 12th. Hope everybody's doing well and are safe. I'm going to take a look at all the futures for the major pairs, not the major pairs, but the major currencies, and some of the indices as well. All right, starting off with the Australian dollar, and I'm on the weekly time frame. And based on last week's analysis, the expectation was that we were at a previous resistance area, which we have definitely uh, hit and are now turning back to the downside. So it looks like it's all but downhill from here for the Australian dollar for the foreseeable future. So I'm looking at further declines going into this week. And we already started off with a move to the downside, and it's looking like it's going to continue at least to the first support area. We could see that move there. We could probably get a bounce back up, sort of like a fake out move to entice people to go long, but then we'll see a carry on to the downside, which would coincide with a very strong head and shoulders type setup. So a break and a breach of this low here will indicate further declines in a more dramatic fashion. Okay, so that would be the expected move. Of course, it's going to take a little while to play out, so we'll see further declines into this week before we get a turnaround. Okay, so that's the Aussie. Let's take a look at Bitcoin on the weekly time frame. Bitcoin has had quite the move to the upside, and there's nothing to gauge it at to our left. It's just this is the highest it's been. It's taken a little break back down, and it's looking strong right now, going back to the upside. So let's see if it's going to continue into the week. It looks like that's the case. We have a strong move off the open today, and it's pushing back to the upside. So it looks like it's going to be challenging the previous highs. So we could see further dramatic moves to the upside and possible breach of the previous high in the 58,000 area. Okay, so some further moves to the upside for Bitcoin going into this week. Taking a look at crude oil. Okay, and crude oil has been having quite the moves ever since it went negative and below 45 and so forth. It's had quite a dramatic turnaround and is looking quite strong at this point. We have just reached the previous resistance and are breaching that level to the upside with a lot of strength. So can we see further moves to the next resistance area? That is definitely totally possible. So we'd be looking at $75 oil in short order. I'm not going to say that it's going to do that this week. It's totally possible that it could, but it looks like it's very strong right now and could definitely challenge that area before the week is out. So very strong looking moves for the for oil, and I'm not going to bet against it at this point in time. Let's take a look at the Canadian dollar, or yeah, the Canadian dollar on the weekly. Also has lots of strength, but we reached a resistance area and is now looking to turn back to the downside. So some weakness showing up in the Canadian dollar, and looks like that might continue into this week as well. We have our lows to this level, so unless we break above this high going up, it looks like Canadian dollar will likely challenge the previous 78 cents area. So right now, in a sort of a very challenging area, and we could see a breach to the upside or to the downside, but I'm looking more to downside follow through into this week. Okay, euro. On the weekly, okay, euro has also reached a previous high and has turned to the downside in quite a dramatic fashion. I was expecting perhaps further move back to the highs, but in this case, it did not do it, and it just decided to turn back to the downside. So we could see further moves coming back down to this level, and we could see a similar setup as we saw with Australian dollar, where breach of this with a head and shoulders pattern with a breach of the neckline would be pretty catastrophic move to the downside. So some weakness in the euro going into this week. Okay, let's take a look at the Swiss franc. Swiss franc, as you can see, has been quite weak on the weekly here. Actually, let me just go back to the euro real quick because I didn't go to the daily to look at it. So euro. So that was the weekly. Let me go to the daily. So on the daily, what you can see is happening here is that yes, we are heading, of course, to the downside. We should be heading right back down to previous support at this level. Okay, so weakness in the euro. The Swiss franc has also seen dramatic turnaround to the downside, and not seeing any abating of that at this point. We could see further moves back down, way back down to these levels here in this area. So a weakness continuation in the Swiss franc is the remainder of the week, basically. Okay, take a look at the Japanese, at gold. Sorry, at gold. On the weekly, gold is also, we were inside of a, do that again. We were inside of a nice channel here, and we still are basically. So we reached the bottom of the channel and a very strong support area, but it looks like price is going to breach right through. I don't think it's going to bounce at this point. So we're looking at continued weakness in gold. And yes, because we're at support, we certainly could get a bounce, a retrace of this current move before we go one more time. That's totally possible, but it still looks very weak to the downside. So if I go back to the weekly, I'm just going to do something here just to show something that can be looked at. If we drew a trend line below, let me get rid of that one and try it again. Let me get a proper trend line, one that has a ray. Okay, so if we drew a trend line, make sure I've got my magnets on. All right, so now you can see when I go to the daily time frame that there is still room for this to drop further to the trend line. So there's still some room for price to drop before we get a bounce. Okay, so I'd be expecting a move down similar and a bounce back up, and that can certainly play out the same way. So even if we drew a channel line at the top, then we get something similar. So if we did something like that, we could see price, of course, pushing back up. Of course, it's not going to do it. It's going to do it that way, and meeting that trend line before it continues again to the downside. But right now for this week, it looks weak in the short term, at least, anyways. Okay, so that's gold. Let's take a look at the Japanese yen. Japanese yen has also been very weak, along with the Swiss, and lots of opportunities in the major pairs for the members of the Simple 123 trading group to make pips in the major pairs based off the US dollar strength and weakness in Swiss and Japanese yen especially. Okay, so Swiss looks quite weak, and our support area would be somewhere down in here, and we could see price definitely challenging and touching those areas before the week is out. The daily, we're still heading down, lots of weakness there. The New Zealand dollar on the weekly. Okay, so again, New Zealand dollar is similar to the Aussie dollar. Reached the heights of its resistance area, and is also turning to the downside. So again, similar to the Aussie, we could see further declines into this week, and right now we're right at a very strategic point where we could see price break and continue down, coming back up again to form a 1, 2, 3 top. Of course, this could do the same thing like over here. It could go sideways for a while before it falls. That's totally possible. So right now we're just concentrating on what's happening for this week, but so further declines before we get a turnaround. Okay, the Mexican peso also has shown lots of weakness, and again, continued weakness going into this week as well, and lots of room for this to fall. We're at a minor support area here, but the major support is down. Whoops, major support is down here. So we have lots of room for this to fall to the downside here. So lots of weakness in the Mexican peso, especially if the US dollar continues its climb. I think I missed the US dollar completely. So let me go back to it here. US dollar, there it is. Wow, totally missed that one. Okay, so US dollar, we can quickly draw a trend line on this one, and from here across. So what we get is now a breach. We're right at support area. We made it into the support area, and now we have a breach of our trend line to the upside, and it's looking like we're going to be pushing back up towards the previous resistance area. So looking at lots of strength for the US dollar going into this week, and I'm not seeing any it's I expect the expectation will be for price to come up at least into this area. We could see it go a little higher, somewhere like that. But I would expect from this move to the upside here that we would continue back down one more time. So I think this move to the upside is going to be short-lived, and before it turns to the downside. So strength in the US dollar in the short term at least, and then we might see a change going into later on in the week. Okay, so that was that one, Mexican peso. Let's take a look at the British pound. The British pound, it had lots of strength for a while, but in the last couple of weeks, it's been just downhill. And then, of course, the reason being we've reached the resistance, and now we're turning to the downside. So continued weakness in the British pound going into this week, and you can see that it is setting up for quite a major fall here. I would expect price to reach down into this area before we get a turnaround. Okay, so lots of weakness in the British pound going into this week. Okay. So if that holds, then price, of course, can come into these areas here and then bounce a little bit and so forth. So we could get, again, double head and shoulders type of formation before it continues. So it's never a straight line. So we have to be aware of that. Okay, the next one is silver. Okay, so silver on the weekly. Silver is quite weak. Just a continuation to the downside here. We're faced with first set of support areas here, and then another one here, and then final one to this level. Looks like we're going to be at least making it to this level before the week is out. So weakness in silver going forward. Did I look at gold? I think I did. Yes, we did. That's the gold futures. Okay. Okay. The US dollar, US 2000. This is a Russell 2000 on the weekly time frame. Lots of strength to the upside. We've taken a little bit of a breather on the weekly. We're coming back down. Are we going to continue going down is a key question at this point. So right now, I would say that we have reached the area of support, and we're now turning back to the upside to challenge the previous highs. So I would expect further moves to the upside in the Russell 2000 going into this week. Okay, the US 30, the Dow on the weekly, also very strong. New highs were challenged again this week. Came very close. It's pushing back up again. Looks like we're going to more than likely breach those highs as well to the upside. So strengthen there. The S&P 500 also spinning top right there on that bar, looking like a turn of, very a very indecisive area, but a possible turn of events here. So we've reached a critical point and are pushing back to the upside. So again, I would expect a further challenge of these highs. If we're wrong in all those three, the 2000, the Dow 30, and the US 500, then we'll see a breach of these lows to the downside. And if that happens, then all bets are off, and we're heading way down. So looking for a bounce to the upside, but if, of course, we can be wrong, and if price breaks to the low, then we have to go with what the market's doing. The technology group also is looking quite weak right now. So it might be a portending what's possible. However, again, we've reached a critical support area. We definitely could see price come way down to these levels, at least to here before it bounces. But again, I'm looking for a turnaround to the upside before we continue. I'm seeing an end to that move to the downside right here, and we could see a bounce going back up. So looking at all four, the Russell 2000, the Dow, the S&P 500, and the technology group to continue their assault on the previous highs going into this week. So that's a look at what's setting up for this week. Keep your eyes on the US dollar, especially if you are playing the major pairs. This is a key catalyst. And again, I see further moves to the upside when we could certainly challenge. We could challenge this area definitely. Again, with these moves, so it's totally possible to come back up in here. But I do expect further declines later on as the week progresses. So profitable trading to everyone. Be safe. We're done now. Thank you.